We'd like to talk about good, important things here. And today we're going to talk about how to talk to your kids about our insane politics. I don't know. I don't know if that's a good title or not, Jordan. Do you like that title?
You
Is it
could use
weird?
any adjective there for our noisy politics, our stupid politics. Let's be real. I mean, some of the stuff is just so dumb and loud,
So
and
dumb. I know.
it's just fearful, and it's trying to scare us, and it's annoying. But
Right.
it's like this time of year, you go to your mailbox, political ads. You try to watch
Right.
a video, political ads.
Right.
You turn on the
Right.
TV, political ads. You're like, oh, I'm
Right.
driving down the street. There's an ad in someone's front yard. Oh, another ad in the other front yard. And you're like, this is so
Right.
obnoxious.
Right. And parenting is already hard enough. It's
Right.
hard enough with all these screens everywhere, with all these ads, with all this crap that these kids are looking at, with all these different things. And now we have another thing. How do we talk to our kids about what they're seeing with these political ads?
Yeah. I
And
mean, if
here we
it's this
this
much in front of our face, it's in their
right.
face, maybe even more,
Yeah.
especially with them being on YouTube and all these other platforms that they're on.
Oh my gosh, that brings up a whole nother fear that we're afraid of. Like, what type of pop-up apps are they looking at
Hmm.
on YouTube when we're not around? Now, here's something really interesting. Some of us, many of I think this is a new topic that the politicians of the last 10 years have become so divisive, and it's just crazy. And it wasn't like this before. But here I'm going to tell you that it has been like this. In fact, today we're going to give you some tips and some action steps that I think are really going to be helpful, that are really
Yeah.
going to help you to be a great parent,
Right.
to help you with your kids' emotions, with their fears, with their questions. Because my kids have questions, my teenagers have questions. But here's what I want you to do, Jordan. Just for a minute, I'm going to read to you and describe 3 political ads that have come up. I went on Google and I Googled what are the worst political ads of all time, and this great website popped up that had 10 horrible ads. I
Oh
watched
my
some of them.
gosh.
They were so bad. I'm just going to describe them to you. And I want you to tell me, if you were a child or a teenager, what might you be feeling or thinking?
Okay.
And just a little caveat here. Partly why this episode can be really challenging is because we have some people here that are very political, and you have very, very strong political viewpoints. And I'm going to talk about that and address this in a little bit. But I hope you hear that from my heart. I'm going to share an extremely unbiased parent teaching here. For wherever you align politically, this is for you. I hope you listen with an open heart, ready to learn and to grow and to address a pretty important topic. So, Jordan, can I describe the first ad?
Yeah. Who is it? Who
Okay.
are we going with?
It's a Hillary against Donald Trump ad.
Classic.
Okay. And then the second one is a Donald Trump ad. But here it is. All right, here. So it shows this. It shows this child sleeping in a bed. Everything's peaceful music. And then you hear the voiceover. It says, in a very dark, scary voice. I'll try to do it. It says, it's 3 a.m. and your children are asleep, but there is a phone in the White House and it's ringing. Okay, first off, before I shouldn't do this. I should just tell you the ad. But can you see right off, you just went from a child sleeping in a bed,
Yeah.
and now there's a phone ringing in the White House. It's like they're trying to make us scared of
Sure.
something. Now
Polarity.
you're a child.
Right.
Okay, I'll take it from the top. I won't interrupt this anymore. All right, it's 3 a.m. and your child is asleep, but there's a phone in the White House and it's ringing. Something is happening in the world. Who do you want answering that phone? And then it goes on to say someone with experience, someone who knows about world leaders, all while it's just showing a child calmly
Snoozing.
sleeping, snoozing. Now, these are going to get worse. This is one of the worst,
Yeah.
but they
This
get
isn't bad.
much worse after that.
Okay.
But imagine
Yeah.
it's not that bad.
No, but
Imagine you're a kid, a child watching this. What are
right.
you thinking? What are you thinking?
Right. It's like, I mean, if I'm a kid, I'm gonna believe whatever is being said to me. So if it's
Uh-huh.
showing scenes of a kid sleeping, I'm gonna relate to that kid sleeping. And then if the scenes it's showing is like cities blowing up and security, national security needed, and then it shows like a front runner, like
Yeah,
a hero on a horse, whether that's Hillary or Trump in this situation, I'm gonna want to
right.
believe that because they're trying to get to my
Right.
emotions.
Yes. Yeah. Ad number 2. Okay, a phone is ringing and you look and it's a business office, but the business office is totally empty,
Okay.
right? And then the voiceover comes and it's a answering machine. And here's what the answering machine says. This is an ad. Uh, about paid for by Donald Trump against either Biden or Hillary. I think it's against Biden. Yeah, it's against Biden. You've reached the 911 emergency line. Due to the defunding of the police department, we are sorry, but no one is here to take your call. If you are calling to report a rape, please press 1.
My gosh.
To report a murder, press 2. To report a home invasion, press 3. Or for all other crimes, leave your name and number and someone will get back to you. Our estimated wait time is currently 5 days. And then it says here with the text, you won't be safe in Joe Biden's America, with a picture of Joe Biden with flames and rioting going on in the background.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine being a kid watching that? Like you're in between commercials on like your cartoons and that shows up and you're like, "Mommy, are there
Gosh.
no police officers anymore?"
Right, right. Can you imagine with the flames and the riots? And now that we went through, like, this is the thing. It's kind of cool to do this. Now that we are just have gone through 4 years of Joe Biden's, like, do we still have police? Yes, we
Right.
do. Right,
Right.
right. Yes, there was a movement uh, to anti defund the police, but like, it's just so much of what they're pushing is it's not
Fear-based.
real.
It's
It's not
scary.
real.
Right. It's
It's
not
not
real.
real.
Okay,
All
go
right.
older.
Okay, let's go older. Okay, let's go back. This was on the website. This was voted the number one worst political ad of all time.
Okay.
Number one. Now, these ones that I just read were in the top 5 out of 10, by the way.
Okay.
So maybe I didn't do it justice, but how bad they were. But this one is bad. Okay, so it's a black and white commercial. It's an ad for Lyndon B. Johnson. Lyndon B. Johnson took over for because he was vice president when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. He ended up a president. And he actually won this election, so he was the president for 6 years total. But because he was so unpopular, he decided to not even run for a second term, even though he was eligible. So it's a black and white, and it looks at the cutest little white girl in a prairie of flowers. And she's sitting here with her cute little 4-year-old voice with a little dress. And this is what she says. She's picking petals off of a daisy. And she goes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 8, 7, 9.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, you hear a new voice take over. And it goes like this: 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. And all the while, the camera is zooming into the girl's eyeball. Zoom, 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 zoom. You're like, what is happening right now? What am I watching? And then, boom, a huge nuclear bomb goes off.
Oh, jeez.
And it shows mad
That was a nuclear
devastation
crisis.
of bombs, like blowing up, slow motion explosion. Now, this would be scary in 2024 and 25.
Sure.
But can you imagine watching this? Like at this time when there wasn't so much graphic stuff on TV?
Right.
And then here comes Lyndon's voice. He says this. It says, "These are the stakes. We must love each other or we must die.
My
Vote for Lyndon B.
goodness.
Johnson. The stakes are too high for you to stay home." Can you imagine that?
Dude, that's bold. That's
That's bold.
bold. Going from an explosion, going from nuclear war, and now we still have political ads that have to do with war. Everyone's worried about World War III, end of the world times, right? So you could see that today. Dude, I found one. So this goes back to like 1800, okay? Like when Thomas
Hold on.
Jefferson,
1800?
1800, like it's called the election
So
of the
you
1800. And
and this is so you found one for 1800 because I really thought up until like we prepared for this episode that this was all new. That this type of volatile craziness, like I saw ads, I saw a cool video of like John McCain and Obama and John Kerry and Obama like really sharing pleasantries with each other, saying
right.
nice things to each other. So I thought it was pretty new. So you're telling me
Well,
1800s?
you're right. I mean, I think that too. There's this sense of like professionalism. If you even go back 40 years, we had a lot more of that than we do now. Now it's a lot
Oh,
more
professionalism.
lackadaisical and
Oh,
vile
okay.
language.
Oh, yeah.
However, there was some vile language back then, but it was all written down. We can see and hear this now with the invention of radio and television and internet,
Oh.
so it's more in our face. But back then, it was in like newspapers, and you'd have to read about it, and you
Oh.
weren't getting it if you were a kid. So,
Oh,
like, I'm gonna
interesting.
have you guys listen to this one. We're gonna splice it in. It's called the Election of 1800, and John Adams is in it. And these political parties are attacking each other through the newspaper ads, right? But what someone did is they recreated it and made it more of like a commercial you'd see on TV or hear on the radio.
Oh my gosh.
So here, listen to this.
Oh my gosh, that was crazy, man.
So
That was
I
crazy.
never actually fact checked this, so let me just say put that out there. It's not like I
Yeah,
went back and looked at
yeah,
the newspaper cycle of that time, but I'm
yeah.
taking this person's word for it. But all I think we're trying to say is it's loud, and maybe you could argue it hasn't ever been. It has been this bad, but maybe it hasn't been this loud. And I think that's what we're
Mhm.
trying to indicate because it's
Right.
in your face so much now, and maybe you could
Yes.
hide from it before, but it's very hard to
Right.
hide from it now.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, that is so interesting. Gosh. And the fact is that for better or worse, what I think is happening here, even though I'm not a political expert, is this type of volatility has been around forever in the American political stance.
Right.
And there are always going to be people that are like pushing a positive agenda, and there's always going to be people that are pushing a negative, and then they flip flop. And so let's get down to parenting, because before we give you some action steps on what to do, let me just give you something to think about. And I think this is going to be really helpful because hopefully, after you hear us talk about the complexities of this topic, you will say something like, oh, I haven't thought about that before.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a couple things to think about before we get to the action steps is that, there's such a huge difference between a 17-year-old and a 7-year-old, a huge difference between an 18-year-old and a 12-year-old. They're just the neurological changes in their brain and how they think are really different. And so if you think about showing some of these things to a children, we're assuming that they're going to become afraid. In fact, we each have personal stories about that, which we're going to share here today. But then imagine go back in time to where were you as a teenager, and what would a modern teenager like say or respond to some of these ads? It would be so different from teen to teen. I think some teens could become really angry by what they see. Some teens can be like really checked out or tuned out. Like, this is why I don't even get into politics. This is crazy. And some would be scared.
Mm-hmm.
Some would be disinterested. Like, I don't even care. Whoever cares. So, like, if we're going to have an episode on parenting, we have to talk about how age appropriateness is going to have to play in here.
Yeah, and what we have to do to get our kids to vote the way we want them to vote. No, I'm just joking. The
That's point
That's
two.
point two.
Go ahead, point two. Exactly what you just
I
said.
know. I'm
Point
just
two.
teasing. The
Go ahead.
reality,
No, it's a great point.
I mean, the reality though is like if I were to ask you, do you remember watching political ads when you were watching cartoons or you were a teenager? I
No,
don't. I
no.
don't. And now my kid just yesterday was like, "Ugh." I'm like, "What's wrong, dude?" He's like, "Nothing, another political ad." And I'm like, "It's all
Wow.
over."
And he's 10.
And
He's
he's
10.
10 years old.
Yeah.
This lady again, we're still talking about Trump. Didn't someone try to shoot him? What is going on? And I'm just like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this is getting so loud for
Yes.
me and it's getting so loud for them. And now I have to
So
educate them on
loud.
what's happening.
Right. I think for me and a lot of people my age, before COVID, I was pretty apolitical. Like, I didn't have cable for like 10, 15 years. I still voted, but I really wasn't interested in talking about politics. I really didn't care.
No,
But
we
for
never
me,
did.
COVID kind of made me more political because it came into my life, and how the politicians were so divided over it, and it was so confusing. And so what's so confusing about parenting is like we're all biased here. We are all
Right.
biased, and our biasness is going to leak out and come out either directly or indirectly, and that's going to be something that I want to address here today.
Well, what's interesting is just kind of giving you perspective of what's happening in my neighborhood. It's interesting to watch. I see a family who posts on social media
Okay.
their very strong political beliefs.
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
funny because they know people in their neighborhood are on the opposite side. And so
Yeah,
we
of
have
course.
this polarization that you are creating by being so vocal about what you believe and
Yeah.
thinking that you're
Yes.
going to convince someone, and then you
Yes.
go and ask the person on the other side of the aisle, "Hey, my kid wants to play with your kid. You want to play?" When I just read
Mhm.
what you posted and you were
Mhm.
roasting the followers of that candidate, now you want my kid to
Mhm.
play with your kid? I'm already judging you, and I don't want my kid to be friends with you because of the way you're
Right.
acting on social
Yeah.
media.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like it's better to be
Good honesty.
quiet.
Good honesty. That's why we're right. This is why we're having this episode. How about this? Imagine you're a teenager and you're 16 and you've just heard your parents watching that one channel, news channel over and over and
Sure.
complaining about the other side over and over.
Right.
And you're like, I'm just so sick of this
So sick of
negativity.
it.
I don't want anything to do with this person, my parent. I don't want to be like them. I don't want to have the same political. In fact, I'm so disgusted over how you've been talking about politics my entire life. I'm going to go the other way because it's a
Right.
turnoff.
That's
It's
so
a turnoff.
true. You know
Hmm.
what? I see families like that I work with. All of them are on one side and they have one kid that's on the other side. I'm like, man, that's so interesting. And then they can't talk about it at family dinners, which is why one of the big topics during family holidays is like, don't
Right.
talk about politics because people
Right.
start yelling at each other, get in
Right.
fights. It's absolutely crazy when we shouldn't be talking about it at all. I feel like we should just be talking about the true important things of how you live your day to day. You could argue that voting is part of that, and I get that. But let's slow down for a second because I need
Well,
help from
here's a
you.
quick step. Here's a quick step. Quick step before we go. Pew Research shows and tells us something that we already knew
What?
is that all of us, we want to pass our political views onto our kids and our religious views. Makes sense, right? That's not a big shocker,
Okay, makes sense.
right? In a 35% of US parents say that it's extremely important for or very important for their kids to grow up with their same religious views, not
Right.
political, religious. 35%.
That makes sense. You have
16 per
holidays that are religious. You want to celebrate the time and it might,
Yeah.
so okay, keep going.
We had a whole episode about
Yes, we
that. So
did.
35% say it's extremely important,
Yes.
like 10 out of 10. And then out of, 8 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, 16% say it's extremely important. I passed my political views on to my kids.
Okay.
16.
Okay.
But here's from a parenting coach, from my heart to yours, one of the best ways for you to pass your values on for your kids is for you to talk about them in very lovely, positive, and inviting ways.
Yeah.
So
I
I'm
heard,
trying to
it's
help you
funny.
get what you want here.
Um, everyone knows Tucker Carlson. He leans very far to the right, and I was listening to him on a Meat Eater podcast, and this is another podcast episode. They talk about hunting and fishing and
Okay.
conservation and the importance of keeping that trend in the United States and the world for that matter. But they were
Yeah.
interviewing about he fly fishes, and they started
Yeah.
talking about politics, and they're like, how do you talk to your kids about politics? He's like, I don't. They're like,
Yeah.
really? He's like, I don't say a single. We don't talk about politics at all. I want them to make up their own mind, and I was shocked to hear him say
Someone
that.
so extreme.
So and I'm
Yes.
like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I would have thought you would have been just raving about, the side you're on."
Hmm.
But it's interesting because that could be an interesting approach. Allow your kids to figure it out for themselves instead of us instilling what we think our wisdom is on them. But that
That is
goes
going to be one of our action
that's
steps, but
exactly
that's
right.
easier. That is easier said than done.
It's
I'm going to tell you some
very
things
easier
that
said
I've
than done.
done. But yeah, so again, this is why as we get to these action steps, I hope that as you're listening to this, you think to yourself, oh, I haven't thought about it or I haven't thought about it that way. So here's 7 action steps you can use to really talk to your kids about our insane politics and what they see on the news and these ads and what they're seeing here.
So
Jordan,
here's
get it
action
started.
step number 1, something that I need to implicate or to put into action myself. Limit their exposure and expose them age appropriately. You have to do both. I probably
Mhm.
should get on, take my time, go to the YouTube settings, go to the ads function and turn off
Mhm.
political ads or get rid of it and maybe gear it towards kids. If you're signed
Mhm.
on to their account, it's less likely to be political because you got to be 18 or older to vote and to be more like cartoon figures and Nerf gun. So I probably should
Yeah.
be doing that by limiting their exposure if I'm giving them tech time on the iPad watching YouTube or whatever that is. On the contrary to that, you have to
Yeah.
also expose them to some of this stuff. So
Yeah.
honestly, when my son came to me and said, "Hey, who's running for office now? I see this ad and this ad." It was kind of cool because then I could talk to him about, well, who the candidates are right now.
Yeah,
And it was kind of
yeah.
cool just to talk to him about that.
Yeah, everybody have to make their own decision about exposure versus limiting and guiding our kids' eyes. Like I know on one hand, what we've done with our kids is if something comes up on a screen, whether it be like a horror stuff or a sexual thing or even a nasty political things, when they're very young, we'll mute the commercial,
Yep.
we'll change the channel, or
Yep.
we even do the whole I need you to turn your eyes, close your eyes. But then
Yeah.
a month or two ago, Donald Trump was shot in the ear during a speech, and we were watching a family movie at the time. And I get a text from my in-law says Donald Trump was just shot. And so we turned the channel over to the live report, and it was very graphic, blood.
Mhm.
It was like there's blood, and I'm thinking, and I'm talking to my wife, like, do we want to show her this? Because she's only 8. I got 19, I got 15 and 8. And for me, it was an absolute yes. I wanted her to see this as a part of American history. It's happening live. And I felt like it was age appropriate. But if I have a kid who's more prone to nightmares, who's
Mhm.
barely super sensitive to
Anxiety.
things, anxiety, then maybe I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. You could talk a lot about what we just experienced not too long ago, this devastating hurricane that blew through and rocked the southeast, right? I mean, that's a big weather story that you should
Let's talk about
probably,
that.
you know,
Let's talk
talk.
about that because as we're recording it, it only happened like, 5 or 6, 7 days ago. And
Yeah.
we'll push this episode out. So release it earlier than normal because I do want to chat with you about that. Because tell me some thoughts. Because this seems to me as one of the, our country's worst disasters ever. That's what I'm sensing. I don't know if it is or not.
You
It
could
just
be
seems
predicting something
so
that's
bad.
accurate. And I don't have we talk about the data all the time on the Weather Channel, and I don't have the data on how it'll easily be $1 billion disaster. Could it be a multi-billion dollar disaster? Does it top the charts? It very
Mm.
well could because of how many states it impacted far inland. Unfortunately, you could even take this storm and turn it political. See, if you would have just had green energy, then we wouldn't have had this climate change and we wouldn't have
Wow.
had this storm, right? And then people are going to already start to try and sway maybe people in their
Mm.
family about it, and it can get annoying.
Wow.
But the
That's good.
reality is, like, this for me is kind of like a good and bad thing. This is my industry. My kids are aware of it, and it's great. But I'll go to the dang beach with my son, and he's afraid of a tsunami. I don't know why. They don't happen
Yeah.
often at all, but he gets
Right.
scared of certain things. If we have a
Yeah.
tornado outbreak, they get very, very. I got a kid in my neighborhood who will knock on my door during thunderstorms, and he's like, "I'm so terrified of lightning. Is it Jordan? Is it coming? Is it coming?" And I think
Oh my
sometimes too
gosh.
much information scares them too
Right.
much, right? Like
Oh, that
if
is
I tell
so
them about all
good.
the shark attacks that are going on in the Gulf right now, they're not going to want to swim in the ocean. But I'm like, dude, the reality is
Right.
like it's so low. Go swim and have fun.
Right.
So it's that same thing you're saying, how we need to show them the importance of how dangerous weather can be, right? But also be like, but you're safe and you're going to be fine. And the reality is this doesn't happen all the time.
I'm pretty I'm on social media, so I'm seeing these videos from Hurricane Helene, and it's just devastating. It's so then I feel like it's a good decision for me to show some of these videos to my 8-year-old yesterday.
Okay.
And I said, and I'm talking to my mother-in-law. I said, look, this seems really bad. Have you seen some of this footage? She's like, I want to see. Showing her some of it. And it's all flooding and mudslides because
Right.
it sounds like that's I think what you told me before we showed this. That's where the major
Yeah. The,
damage is.
the
It's
mountains got
inland.
hit so hard up in Appalachia. And that's,
Mhm.
500 miles inland. It wasn't, Florida got rocked too, but I mean, this was an inland flooding event
Mhm.
that was insane.
Jeez. And so
So,
she asked me, "What's a hurricane?"
oh, great.
And then I had to describe her. And then one of her main questions that she likes to ask me is, "Do we have those here in
Do we have those
California?"
here? Right.
Because do we have these here? And so I think one way of trying to put it into a fancy sentence is inform your children of these disasters, but then help them to process them emotionally. Help them to process this is something you should not be afraid of. This is something that happened a long ways away. This is a very rare thing. Like help them process how to feel about the news.
So what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're technically saying our action step number 2, which is explain the event, help inform.
Yes. Yes. Action step number 2, parents are teachers and every home is a school. So use your words wisely and
Okay.
help them to process. Help them to process. Here's like some do's and don'ts. What we have right now is not new when it comes to the political landscape. What we have is two big stations that are demonizing the other person, but worse, they're demonizing the other party.
Mhm.
And they're saying anyone who thinks this way has serious, serious problems in their head. But the reality is that almost 100% of us have family members, have really good friends who are in the other political party. Right? You with me on
Yeah,
that?
I see what you're saying. Yes.
We have people we love, good
Correct.
people, smart people,
Right.
wise people, educated. People have been through stuff. And so it's not wise to demonize and to just use such strong language. Something that happens in this world of psychology is a term called catastrophizing. Have you heard that before?
No.
So oftentimes people that struggle with anxiety, what they really struggle with is what's called catastrophizing. So catastrophizing means that like you're making up these really horror stories in your head of bad things that might happen in the future. And you're
Ah,
creating these catastrophes. Oh, I might get bullied today. Oh my gosh, we're going to run out of money. I won't have any money when I'm older.
right.
We won't even be able to pay for my daughter's wedding. Oh my gosh, if he does this, he's going to get sick. He's going to get COVID. We're all going to die.
Right.
It's like, or get in a car accident. There's sharks there.
There's gonna be
So
no
you're
police.
no police.
Right.
We're going to get robbed. Everywhere we go, the druggies are going to take over. This person running for president is the worst.
Yeah.
If he or she becomes president, then this all country's going to hell.
Right.
So then what happens is in the safety of our homes, we catastrophize out loud.
Yeah. Well, and
And
with
our
social
kids.
media, it makes it that much easier to do that. And that's the example I
Mhm.
gave with the family who went online and was
Yeah.
screaming at the other side. And now
Yeah.
the other side's like, well, I don't know if I want my kid to play
Right.
with you because of what you're doing.
Right.
Yes.
So if you're going around saying things like this person's an idiot, there's no
Right.
hope for America. I'm going to
Right.
move if this country gets
Right.
elected. It's all going
Right. I'm
downhill.
going to
You
Canada.
you might want
Yeah.
to realize like you've got to be wiser with your words, and shouldn't be new for you. Like when you're talking about romance or sex, you probably have like a code language you use with your spouse. You
Ooh.
don't just say like in front of like your whole family, "Hey, we having sex tonight?
Right.
Who's on top?" Right? You're like you have a
You're like,
code
hey, do you want to
language.
put on the Cisco song?
Cisco. Oh my god.
You wanna do some getting jiggy with it? Yeah, I see what
Hey,
you're
hey,
saying.
honey, what song we playing tonight when we're making that sweet love? It's Tuesday night. It's sex night.
It's
Right? You have code language. So if
uh,
you've got like somebody, 16 or under in your house, you might want to consider like a code language. Realize like these are children who do not process things the way you do. They have a different brain, and you might not want to be so loosey goosey with your words. And some of you, we've got some haters like Sean. I don't agree with this. You need to be true with our kids. This person's ruining our country.
right,
This candidate is
right.
so against what
To
I
some
believe
people
in.
correct, it goes down to their true beliefs, which ultimately
Yeah.
impact everything about their life. I get that,
So if
but
that's you, then let me coach you. If that's you, let me try to help you get what you want. Let me try to help you get what you want. If you really are in that 16 percentile, you really, 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 really want your kids to follow your political views, and you'd be devastated if they did it. You've got to realize that how you talk, how you handle your emotions, how you talk about this is really going to matter. And if you come off as really lectury, negative, demonize one way, you might be sabotaging yourself, believe it or not.
right. So so are we supposed to try and hold thy tongue as the Bible
Oh,
says? Are we supposed to can we still persuade? Should we? Should we just base our
here's
communication
a
on
tip.
our family values?
Here's a tip. We're all gonna do what we think's best. And
Right.
of course, we're gonna be honest about our views. I have politicians that I love and I have politicians that I despise. So here's some tips. Tip number 3. that I use this. I use all these tips with my children.
Okay.
And so if you'd ever wondered, like, how does a parent coach talk about politics with your
Right.
kids? Here's some more tips that Jordan and I are going to share with you. Tip number 3 is talk about how confusing all this is. Talk about how confusing it is. It is confusing.
Right.
It is.
That's a good point.
Here's an example. Some of my clients are sometimes blended families,
Okay.
right? I don't know if you've ever been in a blended family. I was raised by 2 of them, but it can be pretty confusing for everyone in a
Yeah.
blended family, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, my
how would
best
you?
friend growing up was in a blended family. I didn't really think much of it, but yeah, I guess it is
Yeah,
kinda confusing when you really start to think when you're a kid, I don't
yeah.
think you care, that's the thing, you're just like,
No,
"This is life," you know?
no, I care. I was in a blended family. It was very confusing. Like, why is this? Why is my step parent trying to parent me?
Okay.
Right? Why do you even care what they say? I'm your kid.
Yeah.
Why are you leaving us?
Okay.
You're leaving us. You don't even care about us. What is this? Like, what are these step siblings? I'm just supposed to be friends with them. I don't even
Right.
like them. Like, it's
Okay,
so
okay.
confusing,
Yeah.
right? There's so many different ways of like, well, you're doing, you're being disrespectful. That's not disrespectful. Okay, I'm going to go to mom's then, right? There's just so one of the ways I help. This is just like an analogy. Like one of the ways I help families with blended families is to help the parents talk about how confusing it all is and to humanize themselves to their children. And that really helps the kids to be more comfortable with their own confusion when they see that their parents are confused. You with me?
Yeah.
And it
And
actually creates an avenue of discussion that everyone's confused here. We're not alone.
right. You can maybe say, this is what I think, and this is why I think that. But I could be wrong because there's a lot of lies out there. But these are the ones that I think are not lies. And so this is why I believe this. And they might be like, oh, okay. And maybe, especially as they're older, like you're saying, when you talk to teenagers, it might be helpful to say that because then they could come to the table with other background information that they find because they're older and more mature.
Exactly. So just not being afraid of talking about how confusing it all. Like I don't even know what to believe
Yeah,
sometimes.
me too.
I don't know if it's true or not.
Me
And
too.
just saying that to your kids, whether they're 6 or they're 16. Now, this might be counterintuitive to some of you because you're so focused on what you think is right and you don't feel like you're confused. You feel like this isn't confusing. I would be lying and dishonest if I said this is confusing. But if that's the case, I would just encourage you to really get in touch with your own confusion. It's freaking confusing, everybody. Don't be lying.
Don't
Even
be
if you were to
lying.
ask the candidates that are running right now, is this a little bit confusing, all this stuff, or
Right.
how you handle all this? Just be honest
Be
because
honest.
they can't say it on camera. On camera, they have to project, I got this all figured out. But the reality is that, look, this is kind of confusing. I'm doing the best I can.
All right. So for tip number 4, we kind of alluded to this a little bit, but we want to look at the bright side. Okay. So if you can kind of write that down, we want to look at the positive in some of these scary situations. And Fred Rogers has a quote that we'll go back to. It applies today.
Ooh,
When
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. When I was a boy, and I would see scary things in the news. This is him quoting. I'm quoting him. My
Okay.
mother would say to me, "Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping." For example, if kids hear about a fire in the area, talk about the brave firefighters who quickly arrive on the scene. We did that during 9/11. We praised the
Good.
firefighters like they were heroes.
That's
If they
good.
hear about a natural disaster, talk about all the ways people came together to help those in need,
That's
providing
good.
food, opening their homes, raising money. We're seeing that right now with Helene. It's amazing hearing about the stories that are coming out of some of these communities. Quote
Hmm.
continues, and depending on the news, you and your family can look for ways to become helpers yourselves. As Harvard's Richard Weisberg reminds us, kids and adults alike are more distressed when feel helpless and passive and more comfortable
Yes.
when we're taking action. And I always say when some people, like especially during the holidays, if you feel like your kids are spoiled, they have too much, like go volunteer, go help
Hmm.
feed someone, go do something,
So
and you'll
good.
feel so
Yeah.
much better about
So
that time.
good. I'm imagining a kid who lives in the South who was not affected by the hurricanes, but their family members were, and they're having a hard time sleeping right now because they're so afraid that a hurricane's going to get them.
Yeah, they still might not have
Let's
power.
right. Let's agree that there's thousands of children out there right now that are afraid of hurricanes. You agree with that, right?
Correct.
Maybe hundreds of thousands.
Oh, yeah, a
So
lot.
what Jordan is saying is, highlight how there's helpers, that there's good in the darkness, and even take them to go see people helping,
Mhm.
and maybe just seeing like, hey, this whole house is torn down, but you know what? Everybody's safe and they're going to get through it. And this is probably not going to happen to us. But if it does happen to our neighborhood, a hurricane might come through here, or an X, or a tornado, or a Y, or a Z. We have each other. We're going to be okay.
I mean,
Like,
there's
just
people
that.
that lived through Hurricane Andrew. I believe that was 1992, and they're meteorologists today because of that storm. So they've chosen a career because of
Yeah.
devastation that happened, and we could
Yeah.
very well see that with something like this. That's a good point.
And tone five is just really similar to what we're saying. Point five is action step. Here's a great quote from pbs.org. It says, reassure,
Yeah,
reassure.
reassure. That's good.
Kids need to know that the adults in their lives are there to help and protect them. Reassure them that they're safe and they're loved, and that they can always bring their questions, their worries to you, and that you will work through them together. Remember, there is not there is not much that says everything is going to be all right, like a hug. We cannot fully newsproof our home from unsettling events in the world, but we can help our girls navigate when they hear what they hear through simple, responsive, reassuring conversations and just listening to our kids. Two more quick points on how we can help you talk to your kids about this crazy stuff in the news. What's the
Number
last?
6,
What's
don't say anything you wouldn't want repeated to the teacher or your other relatives.
okay? Okay,
Okay, that
tell me
goes
about
back
that.
to my point, right? How vocal do you wanna be? Some people, they think it's too vocal even if you put a political ad in your front yard. I mean, think of some of the videos you've probably seen on
Yeah,
social media, people coming
yeah,
over and egging houses and all that. So you got
right.
to figure out what too much is for you. But we know kids are like parrots, they repeat everything. If you say
Yeah,
something about one candidate,
mhm,
they
yeah.
could go to school and say it. The teachers could get upset. And shoot, we've already seen how that's been
Yes,
playing out across the nation.
yes. Here's here's something that I'm kind of proud of. I have some very strong people in my family that are very political. Like they're on the extreme wings of things, whether they realize it or not. They are.
Okay.
That's right. So that's why if you're on a strong wing, you often don't even realize you are.
All right.
And so one ways that I've helped my kids process this is that I'll say something like this. Yeah, mom and I, this is who we're voting for. This is who we like. And this is why. But you got to make up a decision for yourself because your own grandparent is voting this way. And
Oh,
your other friend likes this person too. So when you get older, you get to decide. And that goes back to, I think, the wisdom that we heard from that Tucker Carlson quote that you did here. Like, hey, you got to make the decision. Like for me, like being very honest and vulnerable, like my Christian faith is a big part of my life. And the way that I'm trying to help my kids to adopt that faith because I want them to. Of course, I would be dishonest and lying and weird if I didn't.
right.
If I had something I loved that meant so much to me, that brought me so much happiness and joy and hope, and of course, I would want to pass it to my kids.
Right.
But the way I do it is not by using extreme language or by demonizing anyone, but by talking like this, like, hey, this is where mom and I line up, and we have our own story. We both went through a lot to get there. I made the decision to check it out when I was in high school and I got serious about it in college, and your mom got serious about it in college. But you know what? You've got to make your own decision. And
Right.
I hope you check it out. I hope you really take it and you ask questions, you use your logic, you have doubts, and you talk to us about these things. So that's what I'm doing to try to get my kids to adopt my beliefs.
Yeah, and so you're saying we can do that not only for beliefs, but in this world of crazy political ads, if you feel strongly about one way or the other, just kind of being honest and forthcoming about that.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah, man.
sense.
And then
Introducing them at the proper age.
here's something too that our United States government is absolutely incredible. I think it's such a brilliant government system. The Constitution, like what these men and women designed over 200 years ago, is so incredible. And one of the things that they designed is this system of checks and balances.
Right.
So when you have an older teenager or even a younger child that maybe is understanding something and they're really getting afraid, they really don't like a bill that was passed, a law that was passed, they really don't like a politician, then you remember you can say something like this to them. Look, this is why we have, you know, a system.
Yeah,
Because
that's
if
a
you
good
have
point.
somebody that you don't like,
Right.
it's okay. There's other people in the group that are
Got
gonna
it.
that are be going against them. And they all want what's best for their country. They're all doing their own thing.
Yep.
And the best thing we can do is just vote or get involved. And so it's not like this is all like this. Everyone's going this way. No, there's people in there that have good beliefs versus other good beliefs, and they're going to have to work it out. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And this has been helpful. This is good because it's everywhere right now. So just take a deep breath. We're almost through it. And then hopefully we'll
Yeah.
calm down.
Yeah,
And
man.
we'll just wait another 4 years for at least the big presidential one. Unfortunately, it happens every 2 years and we get more ads, but it's okay. This is a good learning process for us adults too.
Hey, thanks for sharing that video with us from back in the John Adams days. That's pretty. Actually, just kind of puts things in perspective. Like, let's not freak out over this. This has been around a long time. We're going to get through it.
Yeah, we are. Thank you.